Okay, welcome back. So in this video, in this lesson, I want us to see how we can um, request multiple rows from our database. Okay, so the pattern pretty much remains the same. However, I will comment this out. Okay. Actually, I should comment out this too. Okay. So we can start. All right. So we know we need to write our query. All right. So let's do that. I'm going to take this one from here. I'm going to copy. But since we're returning multiple rows, multiple quotes, I'm going to call this read quotes. Okay. I think that makes sense. Okay. So I have my query ready. It's going to return all the rows in the quotations table. So how do I do that? Well, we can't use query row anymore because remember, query row returns one row. So instead, we will use query. Okay, so db.query, and all we'll pass is read quotes. Now, db.query, notice it returns the rows and it returns an error. So I'm going to store the rows and comma error equal. Okay. So rows will be the variable that contains all the rows, assuming that everything worked properly. And if there are any error messages, that will be stored in the error variable that we have been using. Some of you might be asking, but wait a minute, why is this a shorthand notation and not an assignment? Well, in Go, if one of the variables is new, then you have to use the shorthand, right? Is old. We have been using it over and over. So if it was only we would have used the equal sign. But since is joined with a new variable, rows, which is new, we have to use the shorthand notation. Okay? Just something to keep in mind. All right, so let's check for errors. So if not nil, then we're gonna do the usual log dot fatal error. Okay. Now, assuming we get past the error message, then the first thing we have to do, okay, and this is standard, we have to make sure to release the result set resource. Okay, so when you use query and a pointer to the rows returned, that means that we have an active connection, right? We have a connection to the database. So if there is any error that happens, something happens to your application, we want to ensure that before we exit, we always release that connection, release whatever resources were taken. And so we use the defer, which you've seen before. And we want to always make sure that we close the result set. Okay? So we want to make sure that we always close. And notice that I close after I have checked for errors. Okay? Okay, so we can now go ahead and do what we need to do. So let's store the quotations in a slice of quotation. Okay, remember this is our struct, okay, which we have created up here. Okay, so this comes in handy. All I'm going to do is make an array or a list of quotations. Okay, so to specify that we want a slice, we're going to say var, we're going to call it quotes, and we're going to say that it's a slice, meaning a list or an array of quotation. Okay, so this will contain the quotations from our database. Okay, and of course, I assume you have read up on slices, which is sort of the equivalent of your arrays, but they're much smarter, and so you can work with them more efficiently. All right, so this is where we're going to store our quotation or quotes. So now, what do we do with rows? Rows has all these rows. So we will have to iterate over each row. Remember how we would, when you looked at cursors, remember when you did cursors in the database unit, how we had to iterate over each row? We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to iterate over each of the row that is returned inside rows. And so, iterate over rows. How do you iterate over a result set? All you do is to say for name of the result set, which is rows, and rows has a function called next. Okay, and what this does, it allows you to go through each of the rows. And so what do I do? Well, I will create a struct, create a quotation for the row. Okay, we did that before, so let's say var q quotation. Okay, so we have a variable, and we're gonna put the row into that variable. We've done that before, so I'm just gonna get that, this one right here. Okay, right? Oops, should not be row. Okay, should be rows. Okay. All right. So we scan. Okay, we scan, and of course, after we scan, we need to provide all the 5 column names, variable names. Okay, which is Q. Okay. All right. So once we have that, then we can go ahead and check in case we have any errors. Okay. So if error not nil, then we'll just halt the program. Okay. Error. Okay. So assuming there are no errors, then it means that we got scan work properly, and so we have access to the columns from that row. So what do I do with the row now? What do? I simply append to our list. Okay, so append to quotes. Okay, and all you have to do is to type quotes. That's the name of our slice here, and we're gonna say, oops, append. What do you want to append to quotes? We want to append Q. Okay. All right. And so we have appended Q, and we're gonna keep iterating, right? So for as many rows as we have, we're gonna iterate, create a struct, push everything into that struct by using scan. If there are any errors, we exit. If not, we simply add that row to our list, to our slice. Now, this is one, after we exit, after we've finished all the rows and we exit, then the first thing we need to always remember, so always, this is just something you have to do. Always check the rows.err function. What this does, the rows.err function will keep track if there were any errors while you were iterating. If there were any errors generated apart from this one, rows.err will know about it. So you need to always make sure you check to see if there were any errors. Okay, so I'm going to say error is rows.err. Okay, and all I'm going to do, I'm going to say if error not nil, then something happened, and then I'm just going to exit. Okay. All right. So it's telling me in yellow. So basically, it's saying, what are you gonna do with this slice? You're just gonna look at it. What are you gonna do with it? Well, let's loop through it. Okay. So let's print our quotes. Okay. Otherwise, it will keep complaining. So how do you loop through a slice? Well, that's easy. So we don't care about the index, so underscore. And we do care about the actual value. So let's call that quote. Okay. And then we're going to use the range and then the list, which is quotes. Okay. Again, you have seen this already, so shouldn't be that difficult. And we just want to print the quote. Okay. So no more warning. All right. So again, the pattern is pretty much the same. You need to create your query. You need to call the provided function, which in this case is query, which gives us all the rows back. We need to check for errors. We need to always make sure that after checking for error, we set up a defer, which means that no matter what happens in this function, if it crashes or whatever, before it exits, it must always call what is after defer. So it must always do rows.close. This way, we ensure that any database connection, any connections that were allocated gets deallocated. Okay. Otherwise, if this keeps running and running and running, then you run out of connections, right? And your application will crash. Won't be able to access the database. So we need to always release the connection resources. Okay, so we then say that we want to store all our quotes in a list, which we call a slice, in Go. And then we will iterate over the rows, the result set, as we call it. And for each row in that result set, I'm going to store that row in a quotation struct. And then I'm going to make sure there are no errors. And then once there are none, I'm going to simply add that to my slice. And I keep doing that for every row. So if I have 5 rows, I'm going to do this 5 times. Now when I exit the result set, I need to always make sure that I check the rows at error function, a variable, just to make sure that there were not any additional errors that I was not looking for. Once I've done that and there are no errors, then it means I can safely print my quotes. All right, and so let's verify that this thing actually works. Go run minute go. Okay. Okay. Parameter 1. What is it talking about? Oh, okay. Yeah, this is not needed. Okay. We're returning all. Okay, so returning, oh yes. So we're returning all. Okay, so we're not returning 1. So there should be no where clause. Okay. So let me see that again. Right? This is what we had. But when you do this, it means you're asking for a specific row, one row, which is not what we want. So we remove it and just select everything from quotations table. So give me everything. Hope that makes sense. Okay, let's try again. Okay, and notice now we have all the rows. 1, 2, 3. We have 3 rows. Okay, since that's what we have in our database. Let's see. Yeah, we have 3 rows. Okay. All right. So that brings us to the end of this lesson. Just to recap, we started by learning how to make a connection. We learned how to test that connection by using ping. Then we learned how to insert a row into our database. We learned how to insert a row and ask that the DBMS give us back the primary key. Okay. We went ahead and we learned how to update a row. We learned how to delete a row. And finally, we learned how to do queries where we could ask for a specific row or we could ask for multiple rows. Okay, so that brings us to end of this lesson. So to summarize, we learned about CRUD. Okay, we learned about CRUD. And so in the next lesson, we will utilize what we know, what we've learned about Go and PostgreSQL to extend our database, to extend our application, whereby we want to have a web application where we have a web page with a form for the user to enter the details of the quotes. So the user will open the web page, they'll be able to type in the name of the author, they'll be able to type in the category, and they'll be able to type in the quote. And then when they hit the submit button, they'll be able to save that quote in database. Likewise, they'll be able to go to another link and they'll be able to see all the quotes. All right, so that's the task for our next lesson. For now, as long as you understand how to deal with CRUD from a PostgreSQL Go perspective, then you are ready for the next lesson. I'll see you in that next lesson.